Hello students and welcome back to the third lecture of the first week for this NPTEL course Power and Politics in Contemporary India, a Sociological View. In the last class we discussed about Karl Marx and is about society, about state and the story of how society changes through historical materialism. Now we understood power being being an aspect of class contradictions, power being an aspect of how the state, the law, as well as other governing classes create an environment, create an ecosystem in which different kinds of communities, different kinds of classes come together and believe that that is what is good for them. We also discussed about something very paramount, and the paramount was how contradictions lead to transition or transformation in societies. But what Marx was doing was that he was not speaking about very minute or micro aspects of life. Rather, what he was doing was something at a macro level, at the grand scale of history. Now, today we are going to discuss Max Weber, another German who lived in the late 19th century and early part of 20th century, who in a sense is one of the true blue-blooded political sociologist, because his works try to bridge state and society in a way that none of the other scholars had done before him. So these are the two significant works of Max Weber: The Protestant Ethic and the Spirit of Capitalism, and Economy and Society. Through these two texts, he argued about how economy is not different from society, or rather he argued how economy and society, they are embedded with each other. With the Protestant Ethic and Spirit of Capitalism, he tried to rewrite the history of capitalism by bringing it to significantly different aspects. One, capitalism in terms of economy; another, Protestant ethic in terms of morals, in terms of morality, in terms of ethics of a religion, of a religious cult. So this is the beauty of the Max Weber, and we'll discuss how this beauty got fructified in one of his key works, Politics as Vocation. Now, vocation is an interesting term in Weber's terminology, because as we have discussed in the Protestant ethic, the word vocation also comes from the Christian religious morality, which basically means that you are doing a work, or you are engaged in a particular work, not just because you want money or you want some immediate gratification, but because of certain higher possibilities which are committed to your existentiality. You believe that's the reason why you are there, and you cannot even imagine of anything else out of it. But at the same time, for him, politics was very significant. And when he's talking about politics, he's talking about the institutional and ethical foundations of political life. And these institutional and ethical foundations of political life get fructified in the way he is looking at the modern state, he is looking at political leaderships and the ethics of this politics. Now let us start with a simple definition of politics. So he says that politics is a striving to influence or share power either among states or among groups within a state. Two keywords here. First is politics and that of power. So politics equals to power. Now this power is not standing in vacuum, because politics is influencing certain aspects of power so that a resultant, the effect needs to be looked at. It is your ability as a group, as a state, to influence somebody's activities or somebody's actions. So, the sociology of the Max Weber is also called social action framework, because he is looking at how actions can be understood through power and politics. So, what he is also doing is that he is also arguing that politics is not just about institutions, but politics is also about who is practicing that. There is power, but who is practicing that power, in what variations, in what variants, and in what moralities that creates a certain kind of state, that creates a certain kind of political organization. So, what is state? A state here, according to Weber, is a human community that successfully claims the monopoly of the legitimate use of physical violence within a given territory. So, what are 2 points that he is emphasizing on? First is territoriality, and second is monopoly over legitimate violence. Do you know why he is doing it? Imagine India being a state. You don't even have to imagine, India is a state, like so many other states which are there on this earth. But if you see these states from the space, you will not see any of the boundaries that are there, because these states do not have the geographical boundaries, rather they have political boundaries. So, territoriality is very significant for a state, and within this territory, physical force and monopoly over that physical force is crucial. Now, something that I did not mention, I am not sure whether you have noticed it or not, is that he is not talking about any state. When Weber speaks about state, he is speaking about something called a modern state. So, the word modern is interesting here, because only a modern state, according to Weber, has a claim over monopoly of the legitimate use of physical force within a given territory. Now, why is territory significant here? Think about any king, think about any emperor, think about the great Mughals, think about the great Maratha Empire, think about the all-time great Alexander, think about the British Empire, think about any of these empires. Do you think any one of these empires had a fixed boundary? In India, we know that we have a fixed boundary. On 3 sides of it, we have water. We have the Indian Ocean, we have the Bay of Bengal, we have the Arabian Sea. On this side, we have Pakistan, here we have Bangladesh, here we have Myanmar, here we have different other kind of countries, and to the north we have China. We have, as a matter of fact, given different names to them. With China, it is called the line of actual control, which is also called LAC. With Pakistan, we have line of control. Although neither line of actual control or line of control are fixed internationally, still on paper or in our own discourses, we consider them to be boundaries. And any moment China comes to this side, we fight them back. Anytime Pakistan tries to cross this LOC, we push them back. This was never the case when they were empires. Just imagine about the British Empire, small island, several thousand kilometers from India, is able to come here and rule over us, able to come here and rule over small other territories. So, they are all of them, they are not bounded together. Whereas currently any country you take, they are all bounded by certain geographical boundaries, and the laws that are created, they are created for this specific territory called India, called Bangladesh. Outside, the moment you move outside of it and do something, there is a war, like it is right now happening between Russia and Ukraine, like it is happening in different other places across Africa. So they are all challenging the territoriality, but all the laws that are created, that are enforced, they are enforced inside of this territory, not outside of it. So that is the reason why when I am talking about monopoly over legitimate violence, it is always related to territory, and that is why the definition of state according to Weber is like that. Second aspect about this monopoly is that when in the earlier times, in traditional societies, when there were traditional states, the emperor did not own an army. Rather, different kind of groups had their own specific armies, and at the time of war, they would lend their armies to the emperor so that they can fight for the emperor under the banner of the emperor. But at the same time, many of them had their own different banners. Think about the colonial period in India. At the time of independence, there were more than 500 native states or the princely states, but they were all subjugated under the hegemony of the British Raj. And because they were all subjugated under the hegemony of the British Raj, so they paid their obeisance, they paid taxes to the British Raj. And each one of these small princely states had their own small fragmented military, police, so on and so forth. But now in a modern state, this is not possible. This is not possible primarily because you cannot have two armies within India. You cannot have Indian Army A and Indian Army B, and they can fight with each other, against each other whenever they want to. No, that is never going to happen. That is the reason why there is a monopoly of legitimate violence. Now, when we are talking about legitimacy, it is very interesting because legitimacy does not come from vacuum. It comes through specific identifiers, and Weber identifies three types of legitimacy. One is through traditional authority, second through charismatic authority, and third through legal rational authority. Now, when he is talking about traditional authority, this is significant because authority is nothing but legitimate power. Without this legitimacy, power cannot be utilized. So, in a traditional form of legitimate authority, in terms of traditional authority, we have something called custom, or any power or any authority that is based on customs. Why do we give so much of respect to our parents? Is it because it is written in the Constitution of India? Or is it because we have been socialized to respect our parents, to respect our elders? Why do you think kings are there? Why do you think the son of a king can only become a king? Tomorrow you feel like becoming the king of England, you cannot become. Only the son of Prince Charles can become the king of England. So this is what comes from tradition, because the tradition has given, and it could be through different ways, One way is through religious affirmations, it could be through religious texts, it could be through certain legal books, so on and so forth. Traditional authority is legitimized, and these monarchs, these patriarchs can use their power on somebody to get their things done the way they want to. Second is that of charismatic authority, in which it is about the personal devotion to a leader. Imagine about for a moment about Mahatma Gandhi. Was it very muscular? Was it 20 feet tall? Or was it so handsome that people looked at him and they were, or do you think he had any magical power? There is a possibility that for all the statements that I just made, all the points that I just made, the answer is no. But what made him a person behind whom an entire country, an entire nation gave its faith? That was his charisma. The charisma that made him a leader, and the personal devotion that people had towards him. There is a scholar by the name David Hardiman. So he wrote a book called The Coming of Devi. This is about tribal Gujarat during the colonial period. And during this time, a movement was starting off, and the movement was gaining ground in the remote corners of that area in Gujarat under the name of Gandhi, under the name of Mahatma, because they would not call him Gandhi or Mahatma Gandhi, rather they would just call him Mahatma. Mahatma or Gandhi, in the guise of Mahatma, came in the dreams of one of the leaders who argued that, see, there are people around us who are giving or who are selling liquor to us, and this liquor is harmful for our body, for our society. Because this is harmful for our body, for our society, it is leading to a lot of conflicts here, and it's also draining all our wealth, whatever little we have. So we have to become teetotalers. We have to follow abstinence. And when we follow this, we can also purify ourselves, our heart and soul, and become like Mahatma. So a movement started, and with this movement, the liquor merchants were chased away from those rural areas of Gujarat, because that entire area was dominated by certain communities who were the sellers and makers of country liquor. So this is very interesting, because you see when somebody starts coming in your dreams and impacting your actions, that is what charisma means. Look at the godheads or the godmen that we have. Think of somebody like Jesus Christ. Again, not the magician, but he was able to influence people that now Christianity is the largest or biggest religion in the world. Think about many of those people and how they did it, and they did it because of personal devotion to the leader. But while traditional authority is traditionally articulated, charismatic authority is about an individual, but both of them cannot survive without legal rational authority and without rule bound order and bureaucracy. Mahatma Gandhi had a very well oiled working machinery which he called bureaucracy, and this bureaucracy planned to its minutest details what he is going to eat, how his charisma is going to be carried forward, what he is writing about, and how his ideas can be spread out, which kind of people he is meeting, what kind of actions he is taking. If he is going to going for a movement like the Dandi Yatra, Dandi March, It was thoroughly planned by this bureaucracy. And even after so many decades of his assassination, the reason I'm still talking about him, the reason you are listening, or you also know about Mahatma Gandhi, is because of this rule bound order of bureaucracy. Take up any religion, they are all led by the bureaucrats, and there is a particular way through which the rules are followed. Without that, neither the traditional authority can survive nor charismatic authority can survive. So we have to understand that in this entire framework, power is accepted as legitimate, and different political systems are created because they all work in tandem with each other. So when they work in tandem with each other, their work, as I said about charisma, is because they have a calling. They are not taking their work just as work, rather they are taking it as a vocation. They want to do it because it's a higher call. It's a call from God. It's a call from the for somebody higher up in the order. It is belief driven, almost sacred, that you have to do it because you have no other choice. That is the reason why we have so many prophets who came on this earth, who passed away, but their legacy carries on. War leaders, think about a person like Osama bin Laden. Very bad person. He was a terrorist. He was killed. But what gave him legitimacy in the eyes of his followers? Was that charisma, or was that something else? The same goes with the demagogues or dictators. How do they function? And why is it that many of these demagogues are worshipped by their followers? So keep that in mind when you move to the other sections. Even in the first class, introductory class, we had discussed a little bit about bureaucracy and how it functions in the modern state, and we had said that it was because of rationalization of state administration, and I had given example of the IAS officers. UPSC conducts exams periodically, and because it conducts exams periodically, so it is done in a very rational manner, and this rationality leads to the selection of certain chosen individuals who are now running the state administration. And modern politics cannot work without organized staff and material control. If it is done, then it will not function. And interestingly, the more organized you are, the more organized your staff is, the better it is going to function. Whether organization in terms of political party, in terms of military, or even in terms of a corporate house. All of them are organized through a rational order. Without that, it cannot work. And the second aspect of bureaucracy in a modern state is that they are not the owners of means of production. That means the bureaucrats do not own the factories and industries. Rather, they are there to manage them. Because according to Max Weber, the moment they start owning the economic aspects of a society, then there will be conflict of interest, and we would not know who is controlling these controllers. Tomorrow your IAS officer also becomes the largest builder of that area. Do you think people are not going to question as to from where this fellow got so much money, and now whether he or she is getting land at a cheaper rate? So these are all conflicts of interests. So according to Max Weber, bureaucracy in a modern state has to move out of it. There should not be any conflict of interest there. Now the next aspect is, when we are talking about modern state, so modern state, different scholars have discussed about modern state in different ways, and uh, Weber speaks about modern state and its development in terms of expropriation. It's a historical change that is happening, in which you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, for example, estates, or let us say they were the manorial lords or manors, and these manors or rajas, they control certain landmass. So what does when a state is formed, what happens? The state takes over all these rajas and tells them that now you are not a raja but one of the citizens of this country, a rich citizen but one of the citizens of this country, not more privileged than others. That is the reason why in a modern state political control is also very centralized. Under a single head, it could be the prime minister, it could be the president, and under a specific apparatus. Otherwise, a modern state cannot exist, and the monopoly over legitimate violence cannot exist, because all four of them are going to carry forward their own militaries. Now, the state, politics, bureaucracy, we have all discussed. So, what is then the politics as vocation? Now, politics as vocation or calling, according to Weber, is about living for politics and living of politics. Living for politics means you have a higher calling, that you want to do something, as the example that I gave of Mahatma Gandhi. He had the idealistic route to do service, to work for politics. He was not, throughout his life as the leader of India, he never had a fixed position. He was not the prime minister, he was not the president, he was never elected to the parliament or to the councils throughout his life. But because he was living for politics as an ideal situation, that's the reason why he was able to do that. But the moment you live off politics, you are doing it for a livelihood. Now, according to Weber, both vocation and avocation are crucial for the running of a state. Historically, according to Weber, and he's giving the example of Germany, the aristocrats and others, they were the ones who were living for politics because they did not have to think about money. But the second aspect is that of the bureaucrats who are engaged in politics as I have been saying, as legitimate power, and they get a salary for that. And these salaried officials and party workers live off politics. And without the salaried officials and party workers, people who have been living for politics cannot function. So, vocation and avocation, they are connected through an umbilical cord. And if you cut off this umbilical cord, then the entire structure just crumbles. So, we have to be very careful when we are glorifying one over another. That is the reason why we have two types of politicians or political activists. One is an occasional politician, another is a professional politician. Now, as states grew, as we have modern states, and then it has become a lot bigger, aristocrats cannot take care of the politics. So, you have to have something which is very significant and very crucial to deal with it. That is the reason why we have occasional politicians in terms of voters and part-time activists. You are a voter, and when you are when there's a student union election in your college campuses or in your university campuses, you go and campaign, but you are not a personal politician there. You are a professional politician there. You are as profession, you are a student, but you have to be careful in terms of what you're doing, how much time you're devoting to each of the activities. Therefore, occasional politicians are also associated with professional politicians who have party tickets, who are becoming MLAs, MPs, prime minister, ministers, presidents, so on and so forth. They are all professional politicians, and they are there because they want to be there. They are full-time specialists. You cannot be an occasional politician and want to gain power without becoming full-time specialist. But both of them are important for a society. That is the reason why party organizations and leaderships are also about the voting, about this jugalbandi between the occasional and professional politicians. Now, the next is that of, as I said, without ethics, nothing is going to work for him. So, there are two kinds of ethics he is talking about. One he is calling ethic of conviction or Gesinnungsethic, and the next he calls as ethic of responsibility or Verantwortungsethik. Gesinnungsethic is nothing but it is about moral consistency. You believe in something, you believe in ideological convictions. Because you believe in ideological convictions, that is the reason why you are doing something. And irrespective of what people think, or they believe in or they do not believe in, you continue to march forward. Somebody might call you reckless in politics, but that does not matter to somebody who is following the ethic of conviction. But somebody who is following the ethic of responsibility are pragmatic in nature, and according to Weber, it is essential for political leadership, because if we are not pragmatic, that means you cannot even take two steps without harming yourself or harming others. They are willing to take responsibility of the consequences of their actions. It leads to political maturity. So, that is the reason why there is a tension between ethic of conviction and ethic of responsibility. But Weber claims that most of the politicians do not follow ethic of conviction or ethic of responsibility as watertight compartments. Rather, they balance conviction with responsibility, and that is what makes them professional politicians, because politics is a strong and slow boring of hard boards. You cannot become successful overnight. You have to devote a lot of time in doing that. So, finally, if you have vocation, or if there is a politics of the vocation, or vocation as politics, or politics as vocation, in whatever way you want to frame it, you have to be passionate, you have to take responsibility, and you have to have the ability to balance needs and ends and means. Without that, you cannot survive as a true political leader for a long time. So, these are the core arguments of politics as a vocation of Max Weber, in which is talking about power, professionalism, bureaucracy, ethics, so on and so forth. So, you can go read more about his work in terms of political and sociology in this work by Gerth and Mills, as well as Anthony Giddens, something that we had discussed even in the previous class. So, before we end today's lecture, I have one question for you, and think about it we'll discuss in one of the classes. So Weber spoke that bureaucrats should not be into politics, should not be in economy. Politicians should not be in the bureaucracy or should not be in economy, should not become capitalists. Or now think about politicians who are doubling up as business persons or actors. Thank you very much.